You think you know how this story ends. A cruel star, a humble janitor, a public humiliation. But by the time the final note fades in this quiet auditorium, the person whose world is shattered isn't the one you're expecting. Stay with me, because this isn't just about revenge, it's about the echo of a forgotten dream, and the moment a ghost from the past silenced the most famous voice in the country. And before we begin, if you believe in hidden depths and second chances, hit that like button. It helps True Kindness Tales bring more stories like this to light. The opulent backstage of the Grand Symphony Hall smelled of expensive perfume, hairspray, and ambition. At its center, cocooned by sycophants and stylists, was Alara Vance. With 5 platinum albums and a voice dubbed the nation's nightingale, she moved through the world as if it were a mirror, seeing only her own magnificent reflection. Tonight was the final rehearsal for her colossal, celestial, tour, and her temper, infamous in the industry, was fraying. The stage lights were a fraction too warm, the sound of a technician's footsteps was too heavy, and the very air seemed to defy her. Her eyes, sharp and seeking a target, scanned the periphery. They landed on a solitary figure pushing a wide broom across the back of the empty auditorium seats. He was a man in his late 50s, clad in a simple gray uniform, his movements slow and methodical, a study in invisibility. His name was Leo, and for 2 decades, he had been the silent caretaker of this temple of music, listening to 1,000 performances from the shadows. Alara's voice, crisp and commanding, cut through the hum of the rehearsal. She stepped off the stage, her stilettos clicking a predatory rhythm on the orchestra pit floor. The entourage followed, a flock of anxious birds. Leo stopped sweeping and looked up, his eyes calm behind wire-rimmed glasses. "Yes, ma'am, this dust," she said, waving a hand as if the word itself was contaminated. "It's everywhere. I can practically taste it. Are you even doing your job?" The accusation was unfair, the hall was pristine. But a lesson needed to be taught, a pressure valve released. Leo simply nodded. "I'll do another pass, ma'am." But Alara wasn't finished. A cruel idea, perfect for amusing her followers and asserting dominance, sparked. She'd seen it in a movie once. "Another pass. I think you need to understand what you're disrespecting with your neglect." She gestured to the grand stage. "This is where art lives. You probably just hear noise." She smiled, a glittering, mirthless thing. "Let's play a game. I'm rehearsing Eternal Flame, the duet. You know it. Of course you don't. I'll sing my part. You'll sing the male part. Let's see what a real sound does in this space you supposedly care for." Her team tittered nervously. Someone whispered, "Alara, maybe not," but was silenced by a glare. This was gold. It would be a hilarious anecdote for her social media, "The time I made a janitor sing with me." The cringe. Leo's shoulders slumped slightly. He gripped the broom handle tighter. "I really shouldn't, ma'am. I just clean." "Nonsense," Alara chirped, her voice sickly sweet. "Consider it a tip, a free masterclass." She took his broom and leaned it against a seat, then took his arm, leading him toward the stage as if leading a child. He came reluctantly, his work boots scuffing on the polished wood. The band watched, confused but obedient. She handed him a spare microphone. It felt alien in his calloused, chemical-roughened hand. From the second chorus, she instructed the band, her eyes gleaming with malicious delight. She began to sing. Her voice was, undeniably, a technical marvel. Clear as crystal, powerful, soaring through the vast hall with practiced ease. She poured theatrical emotion into every line, gesturing grandly. Then she nodded at Leo, the cue for the male part to enter. She turned to face him, ready to witness the awkward croak, the tone-deaf mumble that would justify her entire cruel performance. Leo closed his eyes. He didn't see the smirking faces of Alara's team, or the majestic glare of the stage lights. When he opened his mouth, it wasn't the tentative, thin sound Alara anticipated. It was a voice that seemed to rise from the very foundations of the hall, weathered and warm like old oak, textured with a lifetime of stories yet untouched by any strain. It was a rich, resonant baritone, soft at first, but carrying a depth that physically filled the space. He didn't just sing the words, he lived them. The melody, a simple pop tune in Alara's hands, transformed under his phrasing. He added subtle, aching grace notes, his vibrato not a trained technique but a natural, emotional tremor. He didn't look at Alara. He was somewhere else entirely, his lined face softened by a profound, private connection to the music. The band, instinctively, leaned in. The drummer softened his brushwork. The pianist, a veteran session player, listened for a half-beat and then began to follow Leo's timing, not Alara's. The sound engineers, bored moments before, now sat bolt upright, their hands flying to the mixing console, not to suppress a disaster, but to capture a miracle. Alara's smirk had frozen, then melted away. Her own voice, when she came in for the harmony, suddenly sounded brittle by comparison, all shiny surface and no soul. The contrast was devastating. Where she was performing, he was confessing. The mockery she had orchestrated had backfired catastrophically. She was now the backing singer to a janitor's masterclass in authenticity. A hot flush crept up her neck. She missed her cue, her eyes wide and locked on this man who had become a stranger. She forced herself to continue, but the power was gone from her voice, replaced by a shaky uncertainty. The duet became a solo for Leo, with Alara providing a faint, dissonant shadow. As the final chord hung in the air, a deafening silence followed. Not the silence of awkwardness, but of awe. Someone from the lighting crew, unseen in the booth, slowly brought up a soft, single spotlight that now isolated Leo on the stage. He blinked, seeming to return to his body, to remember where he was. A faint, sad smile touched his lips, and he gave a small, apologetic nod, not to Alara, but to the band. He placed the microphone gently on the stage floor, the click echoing, and walked back into the shadows to retrieve his broom. Alara stood utterly alone in the center of the stage she had owned for a decade. The humiliation was a physical pain, 1,000 needles pricking her ego. But beneath the searing shame, something else stirred, a terrifying, unfamiliar feeling of being completely and utterly outclassed. It wasn't just that he could sing, it was that he possessed the very thing the critics said she lacked, the unteachable heart of the music. Alara did not sleep that night. The sound of Leo's voice played on a loop in her mind, haunting her. The tour rehearsal was forgotten. Her pride, however, was a wounded beast. She couldn't let this stand. The next morning, she returned to the hall, not as a queen, but as a detective. She bypassed her green room and went straight to the administration office, demanding the employment file for the janitor named Leo. The manager, startled, handed over a thin folder. The employment history was sparse. Leo Gable, hired as a custodian 22 years ago. Reliable, quiet, keeps to himself. An attached note mentioned he'd requested no music be played over the hall speakers during his cleaning shifts. Prefers the quiet, it said. But at the bottom of the file was a faded, yellowed newspaper clipping from over 30 years prior. The headline read, "Rising opera star Leonardo Gabelli disappears after devastating review." The article detailed the meteoric rise of a young bass baritone from the conservatory, hailed as the next great hope of Italian opera. A single, vicious critique from a powerful newspaper had not just panned his performance, it had eviscerated his character, his background, his very right to be on the stage. The singer, the article concluded, had cancelled all future engagements and vanished from public life. The black and white photo showed a young man with intense, hopeful eyes and a proud jaw. The eyes were unmistakable. They were Leo's. Alara felt the world tilt. The janitor wasn't just a talented amateur, he was a phantom, a shattered artist whose dream she had unknowingly trampled for sport. Her cruelty hadn't been directed at a simple man, but at the ghost of a maestro. The review that destroyed him was quoted, "Gabelli possesses a voice of rough-hewn power, but lacks the refinement and emotional intelligence for true greatness. He sings with the soul of a laborer, not a legend." She found him in the upper balcony, methodically wiping down railings. The morning light streamed through the high windows, casting him in a gentle glow. He looked up, saw her, and gave a quiet nod, no resentment in his gaze, only a deep, everlasting weariness. "Leonardo Gabelli," she said, her voice a hoarse whisper. He paused, then slowly straightened. "That man," he said softly, "was buried a long time ago, Ms. Vance. Leo the janitor does just fine. Why did you stop?" The question burst from her. "One bad review." "It wasn't the review," he said, looking out over the empty, sun-dappled seats. "It was the truth in it. I sang from a place of ambition, not love. I wanted to be great, not to serve the music. That critic heard the emptiness. So I stopped. I found a job where I could be near music, to listen to it purely, to care for the space that held it. To atone, in my way." He turned to her, his eyes clear. "You have a magnificent instrument, Ms. Vance. A gift. But yesterday, you were singing to mock me. I was singing to remember a friend I lost long ago." He picked up his cleaning cart. "The hall is ready for you." It will be spotless. As he walked away, Alara understood the true depth of her humiliation. It wasn't public. It was private, existential. She had built an empire on a voice that was, at its core, a brilliant technical achievement. He had walked away from a potential empire because his voice, however magnificent, wasn't true enough for him. Her cruelty had been met not with revenge, but with a quiet, devastating lesson in humility and artistry. That night, she took the stage for her first tour performance. As the opening chords played and the crowd roared, she felt a paralyzing fear. She looked into the wings and saw Leo, in his gray uniform, giving the stage one final check. He caught her eye, and with no malice, only a faint, distant kindness, he gave a single, slow nod. And when Alara Vance opened her mouth to sing, for the first time in her career, she did not think about selling out arenas or hitting the perfect note. She thought of a lost dream, a silent ghost, and the profound weight of a true gift. Her voice broke on the first line, not with imperfection, but with a raw, vulnerable emotion that stunned the audience into a deeper silence. For the first time, the nation's nightingale wasn't just singing. She was finally feeling. And it was the most beautiful sound she had ever made. The ghost of a maestro taught the world's biggest star the meaning of a single, true note. If this story of hidden depth and breathtaking humility moved you, subscribe to True Kindness Tales. We find the light in unexpected places, and your subscription helps us share more tales that remind us that heroes often wear the quietest disguises. Click that subscribe button and join our community.